The movie opens in an Italian convent where a nun named Marie is seen praying late at night, begging God for forgiveness. Moments later, she sneaks into Mother Superior's room and carefully steals a set of keys from a drawer. Marie then hurries outside and approaches the entrance to escape, but she's soon discovered. As she struggles to open the gate, 4 hooded nuns appear, prompting the panicked girl to try to squeeze herself between the bars. Unfortunately, she's apprehended, and Marie fractures her foot in the struggle and collapses in pain. Sometime later, Marie wakes up inside a coffin and is horrified to realize she has been buried alive. The terrified nun screams at the top of her lungs and pleads for help, but no one comes to her aid. The scene then cuts to several days later, introducing another nun named Cecilia, who has just arrived in Italy from America to serve at a convent. The airport officials are surprised that someone so young and beautiful would choose such a life. Soon after, a man named Deacon picks her up and drives her to the convent, which lies far from the city in a remote area. Upon her arrival, Cecilia is greeted by Mother Superior, who mentions that they have been eagerly awaiting her. Beside her stands a nun named Isabel, who doesn't seem pleased about the new nun's arrival. After introductions, Isabel escorts Cecilia to her chamber, and on the way she explains that the place serves as a hospice, where old women from nearby areas come to spend their final days in peace. Isabel also shares that the convent was built atop St. Stephen's catacomb, where no one is allowed to enter. When they reach the room, Isabel tells Cecilia that she can still turn back if she wants to, assuring her that God will forgive her. But Cecilia refuses to change her mind, so a displeased Isabel simply tells her not to be late for the ceremony and leaves. Later, Cecilia meets another nun named Gwen, who seems kind and welcomes her to the convent. That evening, a ceremony is held to welcome Cecilia, and she meets Father Tedeschi, the man who invited her to the convent. The event is led by Cardinal Merola, and since Cecilia doesn't understand Italian, Father Tedeschi translates everything for her. Cecilia then takes the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience before God, after which the cardinal formally declares her a nun. Afterward, everyone gathers for a meal, during which Cecilia speaks with Father Tedeschi. He then reveals that he didn't always intend to become a priest. His career path was originally in science and biology, but God eventually led him in a different direction. He asks about her reasons for being a nun, and Cecilia tells him that when she was 12, she used to play on a frozen river until one day the ice broke. Paramedics pulled her out, but she did not breathe for 7 minutes before miraculously regaining consciousness. She believes God saved her for a reason, but she is still unsure what that reason is. Later, Cecilia is in the bathroom when she hears strange sounds and decides to investigate. She soon arrives at a room where she finds a nun lying on the floor in prayer. The bizarre part is that the nun's face is completely covered with a red cloth, which terrifies Cecilia. Just then, Mother Superior arrives and reassures her that sometimes emotions overflow during prayer. She then takes Cecilia to a kind of sanctuary and shows her a heavy and ancient nail. Shockingly, she reveals that it is the same nail that pierced Jesus' hands, which was brought from Jerusalem by Saint Helena. Cecilia is overwhelmed by hearing this, which causes her to become dizzy and suddenly lose consciousness. The next morning, Cecilia wakes up feeling confused about the events of the previous night, but she assumes she had simply drunk too much wine. Later, Mother Superior gathers all the nuns and assigns Isabel to mentor Cecilia and Gwen. Isabel proceeds to teach them how to care for the sick sisters, handle the laundry, and even how to slaughter chickens for cooking. During this time, Gwen and Cecilia form a close bond, working side by side as they complete all the convent chores together. One night, Cecilia is sleeping peacefully when she is suddenly jolted awake by the arrival of an elderly woman. The woman cuts off a lock of her hair with scissors, declaring that Cecilia is a blessed saint and that everyone adores her. But Cecilia thinks that the woman is merely delusional and helps her to go back to her bed. As the old woman lies down, Cecilia is stunned to notice cross-shaped scars on the soles of her feet. The next day, while bathing with the other nuns, Cecilia tells Gwen about the events of the previous night. She then suddenly feels unwell and begins to vomit profusely, prompting Gwen to fetch the doctor. Later, Cecilia meets with the convent's physician, Dr. Gallo, who conducts a series of tests to determine her condition. Sometime later, Mother Superior takes Cecilia to a room where Dr. Gallo, Father Tedeschi, and Cardinal Merola are already waiting. They all appear very serious and ask Cecilia if she has slept with a man recently. The young nun is stunned by the question and insists that she has never been with a man in her entire life. Dr. Gallo confirms this, noting that when she first arrived, he had checked her and her hymen was still intact. Mother Superior also adds that no man has visited the convent recently, making it impossible for her to have been with anyone. At that moment, Isabel enters the room carrying an ultrasound machine, and when Dr. Gallo examines Cecilia, it becomes clear that she is pregnant. Cecilia is utterly horrified, while Cardinal Merola declares that the baby was conceived without sin, so it is a miracle. Cecilia then asks Father Tedeschi why God chose her out of all the women in the world. He responds that this is precisely why God spared her life as a child, as it was her destiny from the very beginning. In the next scene, the entire convent holds a special mass for Cecilia, during which she is crowned in a style honoring the Virgin Mary. All the sisters sing in chorus, while Gwen feels uncomfortable, and Isabel looks at Cecilia with visible jealousy. The scene then cuts to her second trimester, where the vomiting becomes constant, and Cecilia is shocked to discover that a tooth has fallen out. Later, she enters the dining room, and all the nuns rise from their seats to show respect, except for Gwen. Cecilia sits beside her, and a nun brings a tray of delicious food, explaining that she doesn't need to work, and all she must do is nourish herself to care for the baby. In the afternoon, Cecilia is relaxing in the bathtub when, out of nowhere, a pair of hands grabs her and tries to drag her under. She realizes the woman attacking her is Isabel and bites her hand to defend herself, but Isabel grabs her again, insisting that she should have been the one chosen by God. She pulls Cecilia under the water once more, but fortunately some nuns arrive and restrain the psychotic woman. While Isabel is being dragged away, she continues yelling that they must try again with her, leaving Cecilia confused. Later, Dr. Gallo examines Cecilia and confirms that everything is fine with the baby, and there is no bleeding. Cecilia asks Tedeschi why Isabel tried to hurt her, and he explains that the woman is mentally ill. Cecilia also requests to see another doctor, since the convent physician isn't a specialist and only treats old women. However, Tedeschi reassures her that Dr. Gallo is a highly qualified physician and adds that the hospital isn't a safe place, as she might catch a virus or risk spreading word of the miracle baby. After some time, Cecilia walks through the convent courtyard and notices two nuns standing at a window, their faces hidden behind red masks. She doesn't pay much attention and continues walking until someone suddenly jumps from the roof and falls to the ground. All the nuns rush over to see what has happened and are horrified to notice that it is Isabel, who is now dead. The scene then cuts to the funeral, where the tragic incident has left all the nuns in the convent horrified, yet they continue to act as if nothing happened. However, Gwen can no longer hold back and tells Cecilia that something is terribly wrong in the convent. She points out that Cecilia is 5 months pregnant and hasn't even been to a real hospital. Father Tedeschi notices her outburst and tries to calm her, but Gwen tells him not to touch her. She's outraged that everyone is behaving as if everything is normal, despite Cecilia's mysterious pregnancy and Isabel's death. She even accuses the higher-ups of being liars and frauds, which finally prompts Tedeschi and Deacon to drag her away. That night, Cecilia is sitting on her bed, lost in thought, when suddenly the chains holding a painting of the Virgin Mary break. She leans closer and notices a Bible verse written on the wall behind the painting, but it's in Italian. Cecilia hurriedly opens her English Bible to look up and reads that the verse warns how Satan often masquerades as an angel of light. Worried, Cecilia searches for Gwen in her room but finds it empty, so she begins wandering through the convent's halls. She eventually reaches the cardinal's office, where she begins snooping around and finds a confidential file. Cecilia opens it and is horrified to discover a newspaper article recounting how she miraculously survived her fall into the icy water as a child. The file also includes her personal records and a detailed analysis of her genes and DNA. Before Cecilia can even process the bizarre information, she suddenly hears screaming coming from outside and follows the sound. She walks through the courtyard and soon comes across a room where she sees a nun in a red mask torturing poor Gwen. The nun places a device into Gwen's mouth and brutally cuts her tongue, while Cecilia watches in horror. However, just as she is about to scream, someone appears behind her and covers her mouth. It turns out to be the same elderly woman who had once cut off her hair in the middle of the night. She gives Cecilia a cross wrapped in her hair and calls her a blessed saint. Fearing for her life, Cecilia tells her that they need to leave, but the old woman warns her that they will never be able to escape. The next morning, everyone in the convent wakes up to Cecilia's scream of pain. Mother Superior, accompanied by Father Tedeschi, enters the room and is shocked to see her abdomen and legs covered in blood. Mother Superior insists on calling an ambulance, since Dr. Gallo is not at the convent on Saturdays, but Tedeschi is very reluctant. However, when Cecilia begins screaming that she doesn't want to die, the man finally gives in. He and Deacon hurriedly put her in a car and decide to drive her to the hospital. After they leave, Mother Superior kneels by Cecilia's bed and begins praying for their Savior's safety. But she soon notices a feather on the floor, and when she bends down, she's shocked to discover the headless body of a chicken under the bed. Elsewhere, we see Cecilia pretending to be in pain when Tedeschi receives a call from Mother Superior and finds out that she's just faking being hurt. He immediately orders Deacon to stop the car, and Cecilia realizes her cover is blown. Without wasting any time, she exits the vehicle and desperately runs through the countryside, but the men easily manage to catch her. Later, Cecilia is brought back to the convent, where Mother Superior forces her to take a cold shower. She scolds the young nun for putting a dead animal inside her, and for making them think that their savior was in danger. Cecilia declares that God will never forgive them and enrages the old woman, who responds with a hard slap across her face. Afterwards, Cecilia is tied to a wheelchair, and Father Tedeschi apologizes for his actions, assuring her that she is safe now. She wants to know what they did to her, so Tedeschi shows her the sacred nail and explains that, for some people, it is just a rusty nail, but for others, it is a symbol of Jesus' suffering. He reveals that years ago, they performed an analysis on it and found blood and bone fragments, which provided a genetic code. All they needed to do was break the code to decipher the key to Jesus' resurrection. Next, Tedeschi takes Cecilia to another room filled with jars containing fetuses. He explains that for 20 years, they had been attempting to clone Jesus through a virgin mother, but had repeatedly failed. After countless trials, they finally found a compatible and successful vessel, who is none other than Cecilia. Tedeschi had left the field of genetics because many criticized the ethics of his experiments, but upon becoming a priest, he was allowed to use DNA samples from the Holy Nail to impregnate nuns in the hope of bringing a new Messiah. Upon hearing this, Cecilia is stunned and accuses Tedeschi of playing God, but the man disagrees. He and Deacon then heat an iron cross and begin branding her feet with it, causing the poor woman to scream in pain. Cecilia recognizes the mark on the old woman and realizes she too was a victim of this cruel experiment, along with many other women. She is then locked in a room, and no matter how much she screams, no one comes to her aid. In the next scene, some time has passed, and Cecilia is now in the 3rd trimester of her pregnancy, meaning the baby could arrive at any moment. She goes to the confession booth and asks Cardinal Merola how long they have been targeting her, but he doesn't say anything. She tells him that this is not God's work, but he questions that if it isn't God's work, then why isn't God stopping them? Later, Cecilia is lying in bed when Dr. Gallo performs an ultrasound in the presence of Mother Superior. The doctor then leaves to get something, leaving the door open. Cecilia notices this and realizes that Mother Superior is completely absorbed in watching the baby on the ultrasound. Cecilia takes advantage of the situation by grabbing a crucifix and brutally striking the old woman's head. Mother Superior collapses, and Cecilia repeatedly strikes her until her face is completely destroyed, and she dies. She then leaves the room, and her water also breaks a few moments later. Despite the difficult situation, she refuses to give up and approaches Cardinal Merola. She then brutally suffocates him with a rosary until the old man also dies. At this point, Dr. Gallo arrives and is shocked by the sight, so he hurriedly runs away to save his life. Next, Cecilia grabs the cardinal's lighter and searches for Jesus' nail as her contractions begin. She finds the nail and soon arrives at Tedeschi's lab, where she starts pouring ethanol all over the place. Just before she sets everything on fire, Father Tedeschi appears and tries to stop her. He explains that everything she's doing will be in vain, because if she dies, he will simply find another woman to impregnate. At this moment, Cecilia has a contraction, and Tedeschi tries to take advantage of it to snatch her lighter, but the brave woman defends herself with a glass bottle and smashes it over his head. She then storms out and locks the door, but Tedeschi manages to grab her hair through the bars and pull her violently toward the door. In a desperate attempt, Cecilia ignites the lighter and drops it on the floor, setting the entire lab on fire. Tedeschi finally lets her go, and Cecilia collapses to the floor while listening as the man screams in pain. The young nun is relieved to think that the nightmare is finally over, but her relief quickly turns to horror when she sees Tedeschi putting out the fire with an extinguisher. He then smashes the door open, forcing Cecilia to flee at full speed and seek refuge in the catacombs, where she's not allowed to enter. She turns on a flashlight and tries to navigate her way out, but the labyrinthine tunnels confuse her, and she quickly becomes lost. Regardless, Cecilia keeps walking and soon hears Tedeschi also searching for her, leaving her even more frightened. She finds a small chamber and decides to hide there after turning off her flashlight. The man soon passes by, and when Cecilia turns on the flashlight again, she is horrified to see Gwen's decomposing body beside her. The poor woman screams and runs frantically to find an exit before the sadist priest can find her. Not long after, Cecilia finally sees an opening leading outside and desperately tries to escape. But just before she can, Tedeschi appears with his horrifically burnt face and grabs her leg to pull her toward him. He begins to pray and raises a scalpel to extract the baby from her belly. As he starts to cut, Cecilia uses the last of her strength to pull out the holy nail and brutally stabs him in the neck, finally ending his life. In the final scene, Cecilia finally escapes the catacombs while being racked with unbearable pain. She screams and pushes with all her strength until she finally delivers the child. However, she is stunned by the baby, and based on the horrifying noises it is making, we realize she has given birth to a monstrous creature. Without wasting any time, Cecilia bites through the umbilical cord, grabs a large rock, and crushes the baby as the movie comes to an end. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and check out this next video.